capstan oscillator frequency, R20 board 13, or 450 Hertz R78. We want to adjust the oscillator frequency for a stationary 60 cycle or 62.5 cycle in the 50 Hertz standard at TP4 on board 13, or if we use the A-scope or the 529 waveform monitor, then we want to see in both cases a 240 Hertz square wave. 250, of course, on the 50 cycle standard. Step 15, the capstan frequency discriminator. Now that the oscillator has been verified to be on frequency and there's no horizontal movement of the oscillator waveform trace, we adjust R1 on board 12 for the 50 Hertz standard, or R2 for 50. For 0 volts, either on the center panel meter, if you have this, or for 0 volts at TP3 board 12 with a voltmeter or scope. Trim the DC offset on the AFC amplifier for the capstan oscillator. R18 on board number 13 with a scopometer at TP1 board 13. The machine in record or test. We want to see 0 volts there. Step 18, the record phasing sensor. We want to verify electronically that the record timing is correct, and if not, is it excessively out of adjustment. There's a coincidence gate on board 8 into which is applied tack and the third serration. If we have coincidence, there will be a pulse out of this gate. Verify that tack does occur at the third serration, and then adjust R9 on board number 8 for a maximum pulse width at TP2, about a 55 to 60 microsecond pulse at TP1. Optimize the control track record level. On the older servos, the pot is R1 on board 9, newer servos -08 or later, R56. We observe at TP1, record a short segment of tape, the record waveform at TP1, then play it back, observing it in board 10 TP2. We want to see a small inflection at the 0 crossing of the playback waveform. If we do not see the inflection, we're either over or under saturated. So we adjust R1 for about a 45-degree inflection at the crossing. Then at TP1 on board number 10, we verify that the phasing of the control track waveform versus the frame pulse is correct, and if not, adjust R12 on the older servo or R34 on the new servo so that the leading edge of the frame pulse starts at the 90-degree point of the sine wave. Step 21, control track playback level. Verify that there is at least 10 volts of pure sine wave playback at TP6 board 11. If not, adjust R79 board 11. Step 22, the tracking selector switch in the home track position. We peak R43 for maximum tracking, first being sure that the tracking knob is in the center of its range. And at 11 TP5, a pulse between 200 and 800 microseconds. Switch to track position 2. Again, peak the tracking with R44, but don't touch the tracking control. Leave it centered. A pulse at TP5 board 11 between 1200 and 1800. Step 24, switch to track position 3. Again, peak the tracking with a pot R61. And we want to see at TP5 a pulse 22 to 2800 microseconds. Step 25, track position 4. Peak the tracking with R62. 32 to 3800 microseconds at 11 TP5. If we find that when we change tracking position, if we have to retouch the tracking control, then these 4 pots, R43, 44, 61, 62, are probably not correctly adjusted. Step 26, capstan damping. R19 on board number 13, observing at test point 1. Set the scope sweep at 1/10 of a second per centimeter. Machine in playback and adjust for about 3 cycles of decaying oscillation when you disturb the capstan. If we don't have enough control here, we'll have excessive hunting or oscillation in the capstan circuit. The framing phase comparator has as one of its principal waveforms a trapezoid. This trapezoid, for optimum results, must be symmetrical. So we observe at TP6 on board 10 or on the newer servos TP4 and adjust R77 or on the new servos R80 for symmetrical trapezoid. If this is not correct, your lockup in vertical or automatic will be extended. Step 28, the vertical phasing in the drum. We want to observe with the scope at TP3 and adjust R72 for 0 volts. The head must be off, the machine in stop, double E in the vertical mode. Step 29, frame phasing. We want to get a frame lock. We adjust R50 on the older servo or R44 on the new servo, board 10, observing at TP4 or TP2, playing back in home track in the vertical mode, and we want to get a frame lock. Step 30, the framing adjustment. R50 or on the -08 servo R44, TP4 on the older servo or TP5 on -08, triggering the scope at TP1 board 2, playing back in home track vertical mode, and we adjust the pot for 0 volts, and we want to get an indication of vertical comparator on the servo chassis. This should come on. Step 31, drum vertical playback timing. R72 board 1, observing at TP4 and at TP2. And after the vertical comparator light has come on, indicating vertical coincidence, then we adjust R72 for the closest possible coincidence or alignment of the tape vertical sync and reference vertical sync. There will be some jitter in the tape vertical, but we want it to be timed as closely as we can to that of the reference vertical.